Now here's Shutt. Ahead on the right side to Lafleur. Being watched is dropped back to Shutt. Shutt is upended by Schultz. Here's Lafleur out to Peter Mahovlich. He scores! Mahovlich. And they empty that Canadiens bench again. 3 seconds, 2 seconds. The game is over, and the Montreal Canadiens defeat Philadelphia.
And the Canadiens.
Molding new reality, closer to the heart, closer to the heart. The blacksmith and the artist, reflected in their art, they forge their creativity, closer to the heart. Yes, closer to the heart.
To all of you fans that supported that team for 100 years, it was special for you guys, but for us as players, it was something unbelievable. You guys party some night, we partied every night.
Welcome back, Melnick in the afternoon on TSN 690. Mitch Melnick along with John Still, Luca Scott from the great Centennial night, Guy Lafleur at the Bell Center 2009. Shutt, Mahovlich, Lafleur, Dryden, and the rest of the gang knocking off the Philadelphia Flyers to win the first of what turned out to be 4 consecutive Stanley Cups. Steve Shutt won all 5 of his Stanley Cups alongside Ken Dryden and most of those fellows. It's a pleasure to welcome back to the show all-time record holder for goals in a season by a member of the Canadiens, along with his pal, the Flyers, Steve Shutt, at 60. Steve, welcome back. My sincere condolences on the loss of Ken.
Hey, Mitch, we're going to have to stop meeting like this.
I know. I was hoping to see you.
Yeah, I think the last time was with Guy.
That's right. We had you and Pete on, the line mates of the Flower, the last time we spoke on the air. What struck me, and I'm sure a lot of people, Steve, is we couldn't brace ourselves this time. Apparently, nobody outside of the family knew that Ken had cancer. Is that correct?
I think so. Like I was at, Serge Savard put a tournament on last year and he honored all of the Canadians that won the 4 Stanley Cups in a row. And Kenny was there. And actually, he looked fine. He looked older, just like all of us did. And, I had a chance to sit down with him and talk to him and, for a good 15, 20 minutes. And he never said anything about it. Although, Kenny probably wouldn't anyways. But I'm also thinking that when I saw him last year, he actually looked pretty good. So, I'm kind of thinking that this cancer might have been very rapid. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, even as late as the tail end of this last hockey season, he recorded a congratulatory message to Lane Hutson on breaking Chris Chelios' mark for defensemen and with the Canadiens. He looked like Ken Dryden. He looked fine, and he had so much he had so much charisma. Although it wasn't the electrifying kind. It was a presence. He had this presence about him. Whenever you were in his presence, you had the opportunity to do that for 72 to 79, 7 full seasons. Mm-hmm. I think the guy, he won 6 cups in 8 years. I mean, you missed the first one in 71, but what was it like to be around him and the security blanket that he provided to you guys?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is Kenny was a lot like all of the guys in that group. And we had some great stars in that group, but every one of them was very humble. Even and I think with the Canadiens, you learn that from Maurice Richard and Jean Beliveau, and you just passed it down. So that's just the way you were. It didn't matter how great of a player you were still part of the Montreal Canadiens. And in that group in the 70s, as they say, there were some great players. And I think maybe, looking back on it, maybe that's what kept everybody else so humble. Is if you ever thought that you were better than the team, well, guess what? You had to go and practice against those guys the next day. So they'd kind of keep you in your place.
What was it like? What was it? Go ahead. You want to add to that?
Yeah, but I was just saying, Kenny was, obviously a different breed than everybody else. He was, the funny thing about Kenny was when he was at the rink, he was a hockey player. And then afterwards, then he would go out and do his own thing, what he was doing at that particular time, whether he was working on his bar or writing a book or doing whatever he was doing. He really had two separate lives that he lived really throughout, and we understood that. We joked to him about it a couple of times, but we understood that that's just the way that he was.
Yeah, Kenny Dryden working on his bar. He never opened the bar like a lot of former players, but of course they didn't have a law degree. Was there any degree? Resentment may be too strong a word, but the detachment, because Dougie Hamilton got banged up a little bit in Boston because he had the audacity to visit museums and libraries instead of going out and partying with his team. I remember Steve Rogers. Some of the guys used to roll their eyes when Rogers would walk out of the Expos clubhouse with a hardcover book under his arm instead of a sock full of beer cans. Was there any of that about Ken?
No. We knew that's who Ken was. But like if when you're in the dressing room, you're fair game for everybody. And believe me, when you got somebody like Guy Lapointe in your dressing room, you are he was fair game. And but it was Ken when he was in the dressing room, he liked to be part of the fun. He didn't like to be the point of it, just like everybody else. But he certainly had a good laugh when Lapointe was doing some of his shenanigans.
I wish you guys had cell phones back in the day, just for Guy Lapointe and Pete also, I'm sure, with Hall of Famer Steve Shutt on Melnick in the Afternoon on TSN 690. Talk about specifically his strengths as a goaltender.
You know what his biggest strength was, and it people don't realize it. His biggest strength was he could play in a game and get 14 shots during the whole game, and about in the second period when he's only had like 3 or 4 shots, all of a sudden there'll be a clear-cut breakaway, but he was so mentally focused and into the game that he could stop that. And it doesn't seem like much, but until you're doing that, until you realize how mentally in the game you have to be, it is very hard. And there was very few goaltenders could play that. Like Bunny Larocque was a guy, and Bunny was a great goalie too, but Bunny had to have about 30 or 40 shots a game really to feel comfortable. Kenny was the exact opposite. He didn't matter if he got 10 shots a game. He was mentally focused for those 10 shots, and that was really unique.
Yeah, and I'm sure, as great as you guys were, that team in the 70s, there were nights, I would imagine, especially on the road, certain nights that it took a while for the engine to get rolling.
And that's the way it is. Our team was like that. Well, every team's like that. Some days you just get off to a slow start, and I mean, you need your goalie for the first period kind of deal where, Kenny goes in there and stops like 10, 12 shots in the first period. Then we all get settled down, and we always knew that there was no panic. There was no panic going on, that Kenny was there to save us, and we'll regroup between the periods and let's go. So there was no panic.
I think for me personally, Steve, the best night I've ever had inside the Bell Center was the Centennial night, when nobody knew what was going to happen, and Eddie Palchuk threw the buckets of pucks on the ice. You and Pete had been with me in studio on Green Avenue. You didn't give anything away. And then to see all of you come out, led by Patrick Waugh, and then one by one, all of the players from the various eras of the Canadiens who could still skate came out. And the last player out was Ken Dryden in his brown goalie pads. Ken had never put the pads on after he retired in 1979. It's the only time. And it was just, it was hair-raising for a lot of us to see that. I'm staring at a picture right now on my phone of you and him talking while you were skating around the ice for those 8 or 9 minutes as part of the pregame. Do you remember? Did you talk to him about that, or were you just telling him don't fall, or what?
I'm quite sure we were talking about something other than hockey. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Because normally with Ken, that's what you did. But I think that I think we all understood how lucky we were to be in that dynasty. I know each player had a part into it, but we all knew that we couldn't do it ourselves.
With Steve Shutt on Melnick in the afternoon on TSN 690. Scotty Bowman will be with us after 3 o'clock. Did you get a chance to read that book that Ken wrote about Scotty?
I did. And I talked to Kenny and I said, that must have been the hardest book you ever wrote. and he said, because Scotty is kind of quirky in the way that he remembers things and stuff. And so, as Kenny said, he says you had to put it into the sense of a game. How was the game, So, and once he did that, then Scotty just opened up.
With John Still and Luca Scott as well. John?
Steve, having only known Ken as the man post hockey, he came across as a very kind, pretty gentle, warm. The way that he spoke about hockey, it almost kind of makes me think of a similar way to Jean Beliveau, in the same way that you almost thought, how could this guy play the way that needed to be played on the ice, considering how kind of a man he seemed to be. What was he like as a competitor, Ken Dryden, on the ice?
Well, you could see that he was competitive, and he was competitive in whatever he did. He didn't go and give body checks or hit people. He just did what he did, and but you knew, and just watching Ken in practice, even in practice, Ken hated giving up goals. He practiced hard and he played hard. And, we all knew that maybe once in a while he's going to give up a soft goal, but generally when the time was there, he was going to make the big stop and he was going to be the difference.
Yeah. It like so many great Hall of Fame goalies, right? It's just, they don't even in practice, but, let's see, 70s, I guess Bernie Perron in the mid-70s. Like, could you tell just from practice that he was as good as there was during your time?
Well, I just think that Ken was the right goalie for us at that time. As I said, there's very, very few goalies that really could have played with our team, in the sense where, a lot of times you're sitting there for 20 minutes and not getting a shot, and then all of a sudden somebody comes down on a breakaway. So, he was very unique in that aspect. A lot of other goalies really would really have a difficult time playing that way. But, you knew that just going down on Kenny because he was so big, that if you were going to score on him, you had to pick a spot. And those spots were very, very small. And he was a lot, Bernie Perron was like that. Jerry Cheevers was like that. And they were the great goalies of the era.
Luca.
Steve, all the success that you guys had in the 70s and growing with the team, growing with Ken, how difficult was it for you and the team when Ken retired, to lose a presence like that in the locker room as well as a great goaltender?
Well, I think it was it was huge. When you lose your number one goaltender in the prime of his career, it's really tough, and you just don't replace them. And you had to feel sorry for Bunny Larocque, who had to go in there and take over for Ken. And Bunny was a great goalie, but he's wasn't going to be a Ken Dryden. And so it was very tough. But and again, we always knew that Ken had a different motives, and there was other things that were going on in his life, and we knew that hockey was just part of it, and the bigger picture of his life really had a much bigger control over it than just coming and playing hockey.
He was a very important member of it was Paul Martin's tenure as prime minister, as a cabinet minister. Ken did try to win the leadership of the Liberal Party, didn't fare too well. How do you think he might have done as the prime minister of this country?
You know what? It would. Let's think about stuff today, okay? Like Mark Carney is doing a great job, believe me. But you know what he's bringing? He's bringing integrity, okay? He's bringing integrity to the prime minister's office. That's what Ken would have brought. Ken, for all of the years that I knew him, had integrity. He wasn't out to a special deal, or he was trying to work this or trying to work that. He was trying to work what was the best thing for everybody, and those types of things. And that's how I knew him. And would he have been a great prime minister? Who would have known? But he certainly would have devoted himself to the Canadian people.
Final one from John.
Steve, can you kind of remember that early point of realizing how unique and different he was in terms of having priorities away from the rink, either a conversation you had with him or just kind of getting to know just how different of an athlete Ken Dryden appeared to be?
Well, I think we all knew that, even before I got there, because he started before me. That's when he came in from university and then won the cup with the Canadiens. So everybody knew, a little bit about him then. Now I got a chance when I got in there to realize that he, there was lots of different facets of Ken. And that's why, he would be with the guys, part of the team, but then you knew that he had other things to do. And as I say, we all accepted that. There was, he used to be part of the jokes as well. But he certainly wasn't the ringleader, but he sure liked to be around when the guys were having fun. So when it came to that, he was a very good teammate. He was honest. And that's what all you can expect of a teammate.
He said that his favorite Stanley Cup was in '76 because of you guys beating the Flyers and Lafleur had emerged. I know you were part of the 72-73 team, but you were more of a spare part. You were just starting your career. When they won and when you guys won in '76, you were a big reason why you won. You were a star player by then. Do you feel the same way?
I think that was important, not only for our team, but also for the league. Philadelphia at that time, they were coming in, they were playing, the tough brand of hockey, and I think that, I think that the league were really rooting for us to win, because if we would have lost that series, then everybody would have had to load up on their fighters and goons, and literally, the league would have been brought back to almost like a Slapshot era, the movie Slapshot. So I think that everybody was and no disrespect to some of the Philadelphia Flyers there, because they had some pretty good players, but I just feel that we not only we were winning the Stanley Cup for the Montreal Canadiens, but also for the future of the league itself.
Hall of Famer Steve Shutt. Steve, again, thank you so much for joining us. I do promise. I did try during the playoffs last year to get you on, but there were some mixed signals. But before the start of the season, we'd love to talk about the current Canadiens with you.
That sounds like a plan, Mitch.
Thank you as always, Steve.